Tariffs are back. They're back with a vengeance. And I really hate that I have to make a video like this again. But yesterday, the administration announced that there would be a 50% tariff imposed on a wide variety of goods coming from Canada. And as an economist, I want to talk you through what these tariffs are and what they mean for you. Now, you might be asking yourself, Sarah, I thought that the Supreme Court declared earlier this year that the president couldn't unilaterally declare tariffs on countries like this. And technically, you're sort of right, but it's the way that the president is instituting tariffs that was declared unconstitutional. So last year, the president was instituting tariffs using the International Emergency and Economic Powers Act of 1974. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. So over the last several months, the president has been trying to think of ways to institute his tariff policy without using that particular law. Specifically, the president and this administration are using Section 338 of the 1930 Trade Act to implement these tariffs. Now, this section of the law is very obscure. In fact, it has not been used to implement tariffs for about the last 80 years or so. And several lawmakers last year proposed repealing the section because they were afraid that a president could institute tariffs under this law. So what does Section 338 actually allow? Well, it allows the president to institute tariffs of up to 50% on imports from any country that is found to discriminate on U.S. commerce. So this is going to include things like port fees and customs arrangements, things that make it so the U.S. is disadvantaged in trade compared to other countries. However, this section of the law, right, Section 338, is very vague. So it's unclear in our modern court system whether this accusation and implementation of Section 338 would hold up in a U.S. court. And we probably will see whether or not it does hold up in the next couple of months. Now, where will you be feeling these 50% tariffs on goods that are set to go into effect over the next 30 days? Well, considering Canada is the #2 trading partner of the U.S., just behind Mexico, it's safe to assume you will feel it on a wide variety of goods. I think the most notable things looking at this particular list are things like construction materials, so plywood and housing materials, as well as packaging materials, so things like plastic bottles and caps, which, as we know, plastic and cardboard packaging is on just about every product. Interestingly, the administration released about 18 pages of goods that tariffs are expected to be implemented. And interestingly, they are exempting some pretty key imports. Products like oil, which we're already dealing with a shortage of oil due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and things like potash, which is a key ingredient for fertilizer, and the vast majority of potash comes from Canada, which again is not a surprise considering how reliant we are in the US on these key Canadian imports. Now, why is the timing of these 50% tariffs on Canada so important? Well, those 18 pages of goods I mentioned earlier, technically those goods should not be tariffed at all due to the US-Canada-Mexico trade agreement that was passed in 2019 and 2020 during this administration and this president's first term. Those goods under that trade agreement, which replaced the North American Free Trade Agreement, right, or NAFTA, meant that it was establishing good trading practices between the three countries, meaning they wouldn't institute tariffs or retaliation on their trading partners. And while Canada agreed to extend this trade agreement for another 10 years, the US on July 1st asked to renegotiate the terms of this trade agreement, and then several weeks later went to institute 50% tariffs on goods that are not supposed to have tariffs on them due to this exact trade agreement. So whether you want to call this a negotiation strategy or something happening in bad faith of the agreement or a threat, it's very clear that these tariffs going on during the negotiation is going to alter the temperature of these talks, if to say the least. And for now, that's all I got. As always, if you have any questions, let me know.